Yeah.
I was gonna say, yeah, it really depended on where you were, because we drove from the village down to Burlington to get COVID tests on Saturday morning, and there were 4 inches in the village here, and then just down at Taft Corners it was down to 3, and then in South Burlington it was 2, and then we got to Pine Street and they had barely a dusting. You could still see the grass. So it really depended on where you were.
Yeah, it is crazy how it differed. Yeah, it was such a difference. Okay, so does it look, I think it looks like we have quorum now.
Hi, Kim. Hi, Eric.
Good morning.
And Gary too.
Good morning, everyone.
So I guess we can call the meeting to order. I guess it's 7:05 and we have enough folks. So I guess the first thing on the agenda would be to ask for public comment.
No comments from me.
Okay, thank you, Reed. All right, so we can move on to Melinda has the minutes up from November 17th. So you can read those. And I'm seeing the agenda is. Am I not seeing, oh, there we go, the minutes. Okay, thanks, Melinda.
Reed, have you been in touch with Nick since the last meeting at all?
Yes, Nick and I spoke by phone, and I also met with Sonia Schuyler, the president of their board. So I've pulled a commission application off the town website and submitted that to Eric Wells. And I'll attend the Park District's next board meeting, which I think is this week or next week. I think it's early next week.
I'm so pleased to hear that. Thank you for looking into
Thank
that
you.
and serving.
Thanks for doing that,
Reed.
Reed.
That would be fantastic, Reed. Thank you for looking into that.
Please don't stop coming to our meetings. We
Yes.
really wanna.
It's one way to get up in the morning at least.
Eric, you had a suggestion in the chat, is that right?
Yeah, just in number 5, I want to saw it. There's a note, 3rd, 4th line in capital letters, link. Looks like there's supposed to be a hyperlink in there.
And Laura was unable to get the letter drafted before the agenda came out, so we'll do that the next meeting.
I'll move approval of the minutes.
I'll second.
Okay, so all those in favor, say aye.
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 All
I
those opposed? No, and no one's abstaining? Okay, so the minutes of November 17th are approved as written. And good, so got that. Okay, and then we move on to the annual report, which is I guess we're coming up to the deadline. Which I think, was that right, Melinda, was December you wanted to have those by? Melinda, do they ever ask for pictures for the town report? Are you on mute? Are you there? You got to be there.
Somebody's scrolling through the screen.
Yeah, right. Somebody's scrolling. Hmm. She
Must
must
be
not
Melinda's
have
having,
her
must be
cup of
Melinda's having
coffee.
audio issues.
Yeah. Oh, we can't hear you, Melinda. Oh,
Oh,
darn. I guess she is having issues.
she figured that out.
Right, yeah, I didn't think she usually was that quiet. I'm not good at lip reading either. But it does look like most folks did get the information written for the annual report. Is that what everybody else is seeing?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much all there except for that one figure, that one number that's in yellow there.
Okay.
Right at
Oh,
the top.
you know, this is, so I am not seeing anything on my screen. So are folks seeing something on the screen?
No, Melinda is not sharing her screen. Is what you're asking.
Okay, good. I thought I
You
was
can-
missing something.
You can pick it up on the town website if you want to.
Oh dear, that's beyond my.
Okay.
There we go. Here, it's back up. But do we have Melinda's voice?
So Carl, that number you were referring to was the number of pre-applications?
Yeah,
Yeah,
when it says
okay.
XX pre-applications,
Yeah,
just needs that number filled in.
Okay, so Melinda's saying she's going to have to communicate with the chat. So
oh bummer.
yes, yeah, that is. So that was, I guess, the only thing is that correct, Melinda? That's the only information that needs to be finished on the report. Okay, good. All right, so I
That
guess I
and
just
im-
had, go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry, Terry. That and pictures, which yes, we do typically include photographs if possible of activities. And I know last time we discussed this, maybe a couple months ago, we noticed that we needed some.
Oh, okay. So I have some from the bobbling project and the bluebird nesting and the invasive sessions with Laura at Catamount. I did a bird walk or two this year. So okay, so I guess. we
Jerry,
can
did I
do-
just hear you say, sorry, I was scrolling through the report and not entirely picking up on what you're saying. Is the Emerald Ash Borer section, is Laura still working on that? I asked because I just see a triple question mark there at the end of that last sentence or in the middle of that last sentence.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, was it just because she had not connected with Bruce Hoare about whether that needed to come down? Is that right, Melinda?
Are you talking about the,
Oh, she's back.
oh, can you hear me?
Yay.
Okay. Are you talking about the, I'm sorry, I wasn't paying
And then-
attention because I was trying to
and
figure out
then-
my audio.
That's fine. And the Eastern Ash, wait, well, first of all, it's Emerald Ash Borer, not Eastern Ash Borer in, where is it? The purple block of text. I don't know if it's up or down from where you are on the screen now.
Oh, yeah, Emerald Ash Borer.
But the last line there in that paragraph, there's a triple
Yeah.
question mark.
Yes, well, it is. It is slated for removal. I mean, I think you had talked about trying to treat that tree and save it. I don't know, I would recommend that you reserve treatment for, culturally important trees. And I would not call that a tree sitting on the edge of the parking lot particularly of value, but that's my opinion.
I agree, but then I also think we talked about like, just do nothing until it's infested. Like I don't think that we need to cut it down because it like it doesn't need to be cut down yet.
I guess my only thoughts about that is that once it's infested, it becomes a lot more expensive to remove because they get really dangerous. So they have to use they have to probably use a crane, and it just becomes a whole nother thing once it's infested. Whereas now it can probably be taken down with a chainsaw and some chains.
By the town crew?
By somebody we hire.
Oh, so you're gonna have to hire somebody anyway. Yeah.
Right, but the estimate that was given now with an uninfested tree was like a few $100s. If it becomes infested, that estimate is going to increase substantially because then you're talking about bringing in a truck with a crane. So I would, it could be as high as like, over $1,000 to remove the tree once it's infested. I just say that as a caution that, for trees that are definitely like hazards, trees that are around parking lots, it may be advisable to remove them ahead of time before they become infested, but it's just, and I wouldn't say that with every single ash tree, but just ones that will become a hazard.
So is that why, same subject, but switching locations, is that why those trees were removed at the front end of Pleasant Acres neighborhood on Mountain View?
Yeah, I'm guessing those are in the town right away. I'm guessing, or the association removed them. I mean, that may not have been because they're hazardous. It may have been just to spread the costs over time, because once all these ash trees die in the right of way, it's just going to be really expensive to replace them. So that's why Public Works is doing these proactive replacements kind of ahead of time, because just to spread the expense out over time.
From an
So are
annual-
they,
Go ahead, Eric.
are they actually replacing the trees? Because I don't know that I've seen any replacements going in.
The plan is to replace them. They have replaced them in some neighborhoods. They may not have replaced, they haven't replaced them up there, but I believe that's the plan.
Yeah, I noticed they replaced them down near Home Depot, at least some of them,
Mm-hmm.
on those few that as you go to Home Depot. I think one other quick comment about this paragraph, it's, at least in my opinion, it's a little deceiving. It kind of says first they're in Chittenden County and that all trees will die within 5 years. I know it says other than this infestation, but it might be 5 or 8 years or 10 years before they're all infested too. So it's not like now that we found it, all the trees are going to be dead in 5 years. Does anybody else read it that way?
I do agree with you, Gary. I think I think, I don't know, my feeling, which I think I have expressed before, is like, I don't think that this is like an indictment on the future of ash trees in the way that it sometimes gets talked about. And I don't want our narrative to like further perpetuate that. I don't know if I don't think this means like we have to cut down every ash tree, or like there's part of me that thinks like, yeah, it's really expensive to take out a hazard tree, but it's not that expensive. It's not any different to take out an infested tree becomes a hazard tree. But that's like once the infestation is like really far advanced and the tree is really dangerous, right? Like there's an in-between stage where like there's EAB on the tree and it's not a terrible infestation that has made the tree a hazard tree, at which point like it's just the same price to take it out, is it not? So I don't
Yeah,
know, like I feel like it's like cutting off our noses to spite our faces.
Can I make a suggestion? It seems like we're getting
The-
into a
yeah,
discussion about Emerald Ash Borer and beyond reviewing the report. So I'm guessing that there's, and I've heard this before, that there is a desire to have this topic on a future agenda and have Bruce come in and talk about what they've been doing. Maybe I could have somebody from Forest Parks and Rec come in and explain their I don't know, their sort of their strategy around all this, because it seems like there's a desire to have a discussion about it and some you know, just some differences of opinion of, you know, kind of what the state's general strategy has been. So that would be my suggestion, would be to table this discussion for a future meeting. And
I think that's a good
Yeah.
idea. And with respect to the report, I think if you just eliminated the sentence that starts, it is estimated that 99%, I don't think you lost anything in terms of the annual report.
like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in terms of what's slated for removal, it sounds like the last sentence is accurate as written today, which is that that tree is currently slated for removal unless there's a change of course.
Mm.
And then maybe if Belinda does bring some folks in and we can talk it through a little bit further, we can, you know, come to some decision agreement on whether to keep that or not, or, you know, what are the actual costs of removal as opposed to treating. Because I'm starting to look into just quickly prices to treat a tree, because there's one at Catamount that is 13 feet at the DBH, is it? And which
It
here
can't be
is-
13 feet DBH,
Well,
13
so
inches DBH.
well, so how do you do? We took
Circumference, probably.
we took circumference. So we took
Yeah.
a rope.
So
And
then you
we-
divide, it's diameter at breast height times roughly $10 an inch. So you get circumference in inches and then you figure out diameter, pi r square, right?
Oh,
Or you get
okay.
you
So
get a
it's
D tape and then you
Oh.
multiply. It's different dependent on
okay.
who treats it, but it's like roughly $10 an inch.
The tree is big, but anyway, so that was, yeah, I'm just starting to look into that. Okay, so that's a good idea. We can, you know, table that till another meeting and discuss it further.
On the water quality, sorry, I'm gonna switch subjects if we're done with that. I'm allowed for. On the water quality paragraph, do we have some kind of a water quality summary yet, or will we have a summary from Moonsky and RCD before this is published?
Yeah, they will do a report. I doubt they've done it yet. It usually, you know, people don't usually do their reports until like next spring. So I will reach out to them and have them send us a copy. And maybe they can present as well.
That'd be great. Yeah. I was thinking maybe they could, if it was done in time, I don't recall when this has to be completed. I guess it's soon, but if it was done in time, I could add a few bullets about what they found this summer.
Mhm.
That's fine.
Are they done testing for this year?
Yeah. Anything, let's see. Oh, it looks like, Reed, did you add this, or it looks like somebody did?
Yes, I did the I did this section on the SWHA.
Yeah, I kind of think that these other things, we probably don't have room to include that other stuff unless we cut something out or condense some of the stuff up here. I mean, this is obviously going to come out, so maybe I wonder if I can just do that. Yeah.
Are we
let's do-
limited to one page?
Well, we're at a couple of pages right now, and yeah, we're pretty much limited to 2 pages, so.
I think we got enough.
Okay,
I agree. There,
Yep.
there's a lot of meat in here.
I agree as well. I was just thinking maybe one concluding paragraph, you know, in recognition of that last bullet, you know, it would just, I could draft up a sentence or two, just something like the, you know, the Conservation Commission also learned about many new initiatives and projects and programs happening in the town, thanks to all of the groups that presented to the Conservation Commission over the past year or something like that.
mhm. Okay. Cool, all right. So the clerk's office is going to start bugging me about this report. So if we could really set a deadline for next time to finalize it, that would be great. And I'll, in the meantime, dig up some pictures and put them in here.
I'll
Yeah,
send you-
definitely one of
yeah.
Jude.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
And you'll get that number of pre-apps.
Yeah, I can I can probably even do that right now, but yeah.
I think just pictures and the pre-app is what we're missing. And then Eric, if you do end up adding
Yeah.
anything at the end.
Yeah, just
21.
I'm sorry to
Yeah.
have missed Jude's holiday celebration thing. That sounds like it was pretty fun.
Oh, yeah. It was-
Yeah.
Yeah, they were great.
it was nice. She made a lot of holiday cookies.
Mm,
Four
great.
pre-applications.
Well, maybe next year after COVID, maybe is gone, we can do something.
Mhm. Okay,
Okay, so do we have to vote on that or does a motion need to be made or anything?
Not unless, if we do what Melinda said, and bringing a final
Oh,
version to the next meeting. We don't need
Okay.
to make a motion today.
that would be December 15th is our next meeting, so just,
mhm.
okay, great. Well, we're,
I just dropped in that one sentence right above the sign off page or the respectively submitted thing. So,
okay, great, thank you. So we're doing
Great.
pretty good. So next is on the agenda would be natural resource prioritization discussion. There was no link to that, but was there something you wanted to continue?
Well, this was suggested by Reed Carr to put this on an agenda because, you know, during a recent site plan review, you know, for the Trinity Baptist Church, the commission was kind of grappling with trying to prioritize 2 different resources that were impacted, viewshed and habitat. And so it was suggested that we kind of put that as an agenda on the agenda to have a general discussion about how you prioritize different natural resources. I have a suggestion that maybe we start by looking at what was done for the ERF prioritization, you know, just as a starting point. I think that process involved, you know, you guys taking using like a survey, sort of an either or survey to kind of arrive at what your priorities were. And so you did that. You each completed a survey asking you to prioritize different resources. And I took the average of that survey and it's in here somewhere, but anyway.
Yeah, I think it was the 1,000 Minds
Yeah, 1,000
tool that we
Minds.
used. Yeah.
Right. So using that, these are the weights that we came up with. This is kind of a, I don't know, kind of an unsophisticated way to arrive at priorities, but it's a starting point, I think, for you to have a discussion. The other thing I could do, if it's helpful, is bring up our online map of the different resources so you can look at where they are in town. And for example, the thing that came to my mind is there's, important farmlands are considered a conservation area, and it doesn't seem like we've ever really prioritized that. It comes up in every site plan review as one of the conservation areas. It's not weighted very high. We have a map of, the LISA analysis that was done in the 1990s or 1980s. And we have a map of important farmlands that came out of that. There's not very many in town. So I don't know. That's, we have a map of that. We have a map of view sheds. We have a map of forest, significant wildlife habitat, rare, threatened, endangered species, unique natural communities, etc. So yeah, so I don't know how you want to tackle this, but.
So with the farmland, unfortunately, it is important, but it usually is the most easiest to develop. So most for developers to put in developments. So that's a tough one. Even though it is an important for, view sheds and habitat and all that. It's, it seems like it's probably going to be the first to go for development.
Interesting that the one that's got the lowest
from
list
my
here
point of
is
view, the
scenic view
farm-
shed.
What was that, Carl?
That it's interesting that the one that's got the lowest weight on this is scenic view shed.
Right.
Which is one of the things we were discussing with the church proposal.
Hi, you guys hear me?
Not very well.
Yes.
A little choppy.
Weird. Not weird, but. all right.
Now we can.
Go ahead. Okay. I guess from my perspective on the important farmland piece, that's something that we can do almost proactively with conservation easements and working with land trusts to conserve those farmlands before they're targeted by developers. So I guess I see that actually as a separate, what's that?
Which we have been doing for the last 30 years.
Right, yeah, exactly. So, I think that, from on that one, I guess I would suggest we look at remaining parcels that are identified as important farmland and then work through a process to figure out whether or not we want to work with those landowners to conserve them if they're not already, and use the ERF as best we can to do that. But on the other piece, for me, that I brought that question up in that Trinity project because I just felt like we were overly weighting scenic view shed because we had that information already. We did not have or do not have that same level of information for wetlands because we have to, just because of the process that we follow. So we have the view shed layer that's done. We know at the pre-app stage that going into it that, okay, this one is whatever the categories are, moderate foreground or something like that, et cetera, et cetera. But we have to wait for a consultant to come in and do the wetland assessment. And so that happens after we've decided whether or not we want to recommend a project move forward. So it just seems we're kind of doing things in a different order, and therefore unfairly weighting scenic viewshed over wetlands, even though they're at the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of how we weight them and are weighting them in this table here. And I don't have a good solution for that, but that's just, it's an observation and a little bit of a concern to me that became very obvious to me when we were looking at that Trinity project.
Harry, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
It seems to me that the viewshed piece is the one that's causing us the most heartburn because it is so concrete. And as Eric mentioned, we have that information earlier in the process. So I wonder whether one place to start would be to take a look at the viewshed map compared to the ERF prioritization of parcels, and just see where we think there's going to be conflict. Because I know the viewshed map was taken into consideration for prioritizing the ERF, but you can see here that it didn't take a high weighting in that prioritization. So I think we can see where, viewshed would dictate that something would be important, but if it's not, if it doesn't show up on the ERF, then the other, it might be because it was just weighted low. And there may be other areas that, other parcels that show up as high priority for conservation that also are adjacent to or overlap with the viewsheds. And that's where we got into trouble with the Trinity Baptist pre-application, was the fact that we were in a position of deciding whether to shepherd development toward what seems like high priority conservation land versus toward the viewshed, the area that would impact viewshed.
So these are, this is a chart that we use for the Conservation Commission, but when it gets to the DRB, if I remember right, one meeting I was in, they did say that viewshed was way down the bottom of the list when they were considering, applications for development, and that other things were, weighted more heavily. Is that true, Melinda?
You heard the DRB saying that?
Yeah, or just somewhere along the line. Might, been at some meeting, maybe it was at planning, when the Citizens for Responsible Growth were working on trying to get a open space requirement for the RZD.
Yeah, I think that generally the DRB just takes the Conservation Commission's recommendations, as, they rely on the Conservation Commission to review for natural resources, and they pretty much take those recommendations at face value. There may be sometimes when they look at a recommendation and they kind of, question it, but generally if it's, if it's written, if it's written well, the recommendations are taken and just carried into the final recommendations. I don't think they really, have, as a board, have a viewpoint about the prioritization of resources, or that viewshed should always come last.
Maybe it's the way the scoring, that scoring, process that they go through that the scenic view shed is down lower. You don't get that many points.
You
for the
mean-
scenic view shed as
Yeah, are you
opposed to-
talking about growth management?
Yeah, that could be.
Yeah.
I think so.
Well, okay, I mean, that's kind of different, but it is true that you know, I think that points, there's a scoring in growth management that has to do with how visible the development is from the road. And I think generally that's considered, and maybe this body will agree that that's in I guess in the spectrum of natural resources, that's really considered to be not as important as, and I think you talked about this in the last time during Trinity Baptist, that it's probably preferable to have houses be visible from the road than to have them impact wildlife habitat and be invisible. So, you know, I do think that there's a trade-off, and oftentimes scenic view shed falls to the bottom.
I was just
Um,
looking, oh, go ahead, Eric.
No, your turn, Reed.
I was looking at the unified bylaw and looking at chapter 27 conservation areas, and 27.1.2 explains what's the purpose of the standards.
Mhm.
And it explicitly says here in the second sentence, well, first sentence says the protection of conservation areas will provide significant benefits for soil conservation, water quality, groundwater recharge, biological diversity, and the visual character that defines Williston. So it does mention the viewshed aspect in the first sentence. The second sentence, though, reads, these standards will prevent incompatible development from impairing the ecological functions of these areas and reducing the benefits they naturally provide to humans and wildlife. And to me, that second sentence already thank you for bringing it up, Melinda, that second sentence already states that the priority is placed on ecological
Mhm.
benefits.
Mhm.
So if looking at the words we use to frame our bylaws in a way shows the intent of the bylaws. And so I think it's consistent with the intent that viewshed, at least in the view of the current makeup of our commission, has been relegated to being less important than some of the ecological factors.
You know, going back to the list with the prioritizations that you had before, Melinda, could you put that
Yeah.
back up?
Yep.
Yeah, seeing that now, which I had totally forgotten that we did in 2020. It seems to me that this is still a valid way of prioritizing these features, and I don't know that we really need to reprioritize them or redo it beyond this. And I don't know, Reed, you brought up this topic for discussion. Are these criteria satisfactory to you?
Yeah, I think the challenge I see is long-term, Carl. In the short term, Terry, I don't know if you were, I don't think you participated in this. It was pairwise comparison where the survey asked you, you know, if you could conserve a 10-acre parcel that had forest versus a 10-acre parcel that had no forest but did provide a view or something. Which one would you conserve? Does that sound familiar to you?
I don't think so. I
Yeah.
think I started in like November, December, maybe.
Yeah, so I think you
Yeah.
came in just after we did this. So basically we did this survey and we answered these questions. So these percentages don't reflect some you know, broad scientific survey. This is a reflection of the preferences when conserving different elements in Williston of the Conservation Commission. And it doesn't include your values. So it's sort of like a temperature check of the commission more than it is like a scientific study of what's important.
Yeah.
So in the short term, I think this sort of confirms for us what we were feeling when we were looking at the Trinity Baptist pre-application, which is that, okay, yeah, view shed's important, but when push comes to shove, we're going to prioritize moving housing away from the areas that are of ecological value. What I don't think it solves for us is the long term, which is how are future conservation commissions going to interpret the relative importance of these different items. So what I had wondered was whether there is a desire to make it more clear in the unified bylaw that view sheds, things like view sheds or farmland of significant important farmland should be considered almost as like a secondary consideration. Like first is, does the development impact the ecological resources in the area? And then if it does not, then does it impact viewshed or farmland of significance? That sort of line of thinking. Is there support or appetite from the other commissioners to even try to do something like that?
I think, Reed, that sounds like an interesting idea and maybe a little bit ambitious, but I guess to share what I was thinking, maybe for a next step would be to learn from some of the faculty in the region, whether it's at UVM or SUNY Plattsburgh or somewhere else, who are in the natural resource planning field, and just find out, you know, what do they see, or what do they see as the effects of development on habitat fragmentation, and perhaps more importantly to us, what are some strategies that we should consider to minimize those effects. And I'm digging way back into the cobwebs of my memory bank here, but I'm vaguely remembering a project that I can't remember the guy's name. If you at School of Natural Resources, was it Walt maybe Kensel, who is looking at that exactly that question? I think even in
He just
Walt, or
retired.
somewhere in Southern.
He
Walt
just
Pullman.
retired.
Walt Pullman.
Oh,
Okay.
Not
Yeah.
Walt Ketzel, Walt Pullman. Oh, he did
Maybe it
not
was Walt, I
retire.
don't know, but anyway, there was somebody looking at that question, and what I'm remembering, again, very fuzzy memory, was that their conclusion was it's best to actually cluster development, which is what I was trying to suggest at the Trinity project last time. Is it's, you know, it's better to have, even on abutting parcels, it's better to try and cluster the development together, because that actually creates larger parcels or tracts of undeveloped and wild lands, which is obviously better for wildlife. And
Will it
anyway,
help if, when we get this, you know, significant wildlife habitat map done, you know, and identifying these areas, and we'll have that, just like we have the scenic viewshed map and the farmlands. So once we have that map and it shows where those corridors are.
So Terry, you raised an interesting point. Well, so we actually do have a map of that, and so it's not, I mean, I see where Eric is coming from. You know, we haven't had an assessment done, the habitat assessment, which goes a little bit deeper, but we do have a base map of the significant wildlife habitat. We're in the process of refining that map now, so we'll have a better map. But we do have a base. I mean, I can't say the same really for wetlands. We do have one for streams and watershed protection buffers, but the wetlands map is, I would say, pretty close to useless. So that's one, definitely a map that can be improved. But anyway.
And can that be done ahead of time instead of project by project?
That would
at
be
a town scale, no, right?
yeah, that would be, I would say no.
But what we could think about doing is getting an assessment done in areas where we foresee development pressure bumping up against our conservation goals. So rather than doing it again across the entire town, you know, we could look at getting an assessment done on certain areas that we think are going to become problematic.
And one way would be to possibly on the RZD is to have an open space requirement. And that could facilitate to keep some wildlife corridors open. You know, it was tried a couple of years ago, but at a 50% rate, and that was shot down. But I mean, maybe that's something to consider, maybe a small, you know, maybe 20%, 30%. I mean, is this, there's already protection on the ARZD with 75% set aside, but there's nothing for the RZD. So that's where you get this really intense, heavy development. But then again, that's where the town wants the development. There's sewer there. You know, is that going to help protect the rest of the town?
I think Gary has his hand up, Terry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, it's all right. I just want to kind of second what Eric's saying. I think this is a really good table for us to look at, but it's based on partially some expertise on our parts, but more of a gut feeling of what we think is important. So I think some kind of assessment or somebody to help us, maybe lead a workshop or something, and, you know, give us information and guide us in prioritizing these in slightly different ways, with more information might be helpful. I don't know if that's, I could talk to Walt Pullman and just get his feeling on, you know, how you might go about doing that.
Also,
That'd be good.
would it be helpful if, you know, maybe I can dig around for some articles that have explored this topic of prioritization and kind of see if there's some that would be good to share and would have some good information, just to, as a starting point.
Yeah, I think that might be a good idea to give us more information, background information.
I'd just like to express support, Gary, for your idea of reaching out. If you know somebody who works and has done research in this area, I think that would be a great starting point.
Yeah, it was great to have Jens come in and walk us through the wildlife habitat. That was really helpful.
Great.
I mean,
I just wanted to also say the big picture, it just reinforces for me the need to be proactive in conserving lands rather than waiting until there's development pressure and trying to apply the bylaws to limit impacts. It's so important that at least the highest priority parcels that we get on trying to conserve them before they come up for permitting.
And Melinda, you did that, right? There's a map and you actually had numbered the parcels, but then you kind of you changed it to like a color code where it was.
right.
Yeah.
I you know, I think this is a really important discussion to be having, kind of ahead of the next town plan update. And I think, you know, this process of really taking a good hard look at prioritization, and the value of different resources, will be important, to kind of think about now and to continue as we head into the town plan update.
Is that in 2024 or 5?
Oh, we're going to be starting it in 2022. It's got to be done by 2025, but it'll be a long process. And, you know, there's a lot that we want to, yeah, there's a lot that we want to kind of have in this next town plan that we don't have now. So a lot of, and we do want to get a lot of public participation in this as well. So
just,
Linda,
Gary.
if we, I think this is an important thing too. I mean, do we, if we were to like hire somebody, do we have any resources to hire a consultant to lead a workshop or to hire somebody that it's an expert in this type of thing to lead us through this, as well as inviting community members in and get their input. I don't know if it's,
Possibly, yeah. I can talk to Matt about it and see what he says. But yeah, no, I think it's important and worth spending some resources on.
yes, thanks.
That's a good idea, I think, to get it going before 2022, yeah, before we start working on the actual plan. So, with the just kind of thinking about development and things like that, the form-based code, I saw that Emily put out a planner's corner, and she's talking about the form-based code and how form-based code wants to kind of have a lot of development in the growth center. And two, the development is going to happen around where the sewer and water is, which is the RZD, and to try to save the agricultural part of town. So that's really, something to look at. Where is it's pretty obvious. You look at Mountain View Road, and that is really going to be a huge area of development. A lot of land available, but that's where all these, valuable lands are and view sheds. So that's going to be tricky. And if
And it's
people,
worth-
go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's worth noting that the ERF prioritization does take into account likelihood of development pressure. I forget what we called it, Melinda. I don't know if it should be in that same document we're on, but
Yeah, it's let's see. These are resources, these are constraints. There's a different document. Let me see if I can bring that up.
but since this happened prior to your arrival, Terry, I wanted you to know that that was one of the factors that was used to determine the prioritization of various parcels for conservation through ERF funding.
Let's see.
And so,
So yeah, I'm bringing up this thing. So yeah, so the threats, basically resources, threats were considered and
In sewer service area.
Right. So the parcels that are in the sewer service area are going to be under great development pressure.
right, and there's no open space requirement. So that's where they can be.
Anyway, yeah.
Pull it up, okay. And then I think it was Carl that mentioned about getting out ahead of development, so not to wait till it's going into development and, just one piece, one parcel just comes to mind in the RZD is the windswept farm. And I know they don't own all that land, but whoever owns that land, that's huge area and it's got great, views. And if that was all into a high density housing, something like the golf course or, some of these other developments that have just come up, that's a big one, but that's a lot of housing, that's.
It is, and Terry, that's a great example, and just maybe, as you mentioned that, I'm not sure what triggered it, but what it made me think about the natural resource impacts, but also other impacts on town. Like if there's a huge development that went in there, how would that affect traffic on Old Stage Road and Mountain View, and just
Right.
like the one at Trinity Baptist will affect traffic at that intersection with Mountain View and Industrial Avenue. It's not a little bit out of our purview, but it's just it's on my question.
I'm assuming Mountain View Road will be pretty well developed, in the next 20, 30 years. That will look a lot different than it does right now. If nothing, if there's no land conserved.
If I could attempt to summarize, it sounds as though there's interest in getting some expertise, trying to figure out how we could get expertise and whether we have the option of funding a consultant or someone to help us if we decide to move forward on this topic, and that everybody seems to be in agreement that we have proactive things through the ERF prioritization and funding to try to address these, and then we have if that hasn't taken care of it, then we have to rely on having good prioritization amongst the different factors when reviewing permits. Does everybody kind of feel like that summarizes what we just discussed?
Yeah, I think so, Reed. And just to your last point, I've been thinking about that a little bit more as we've been talking with respect to the wetlands. And I don't know what would be involved in this change in process, but I'm wondering if we could consider an approach where if a developer or whoever comes to the town for pre-app and wants to subdivide or develop a parcel and it has wetlands on it, and we know that we're going to require a wetlands habitat disturbance assessment or wetlands assessment or whatever, we ask the town staff, planning staff, ask the applicant to pay a fee to the town, and the town coordinates that assessment before, and that happens before it actually comes to the Conservation Commission and other relevant groups and advisory bodies in town. And that way we can have an informed discussion about those impacts. And it also would speak to the concern that's come up in recent meetings about whether or not the applicant should be hiring their own consultant or the town should be hiring a consultant to do it on behalf of the town, but at the applicant's expense.
So you're saying if there's known wetlands on a parcel that someone's seeking pre-application for, having the process be that a fee is paid to the town and the town gets a wetlands assessment prior to anybody reviewing the application.
Right, because in my experience, whenever an applicant comes in with a project, as soon as we see a wetland that their project will affect or that there are wetlands on that parcel, we require them to have a habitat disturbance or wetland assessment done, right?
Mhm.
So if that's just something that we automatically do, then why not just have it automatically done before it gets to us so that we can have a more informed decision when we need to make the decision?
So the cost of the habitat assessment would still fall on the developer. They would be paying a fee.
I think
Yes.
the reason for that really is mostly financial, because I mean, so the developer submits a pre-app and that's a pretty low investment for them at that point. And because there are at that point a lot of unknowns, and for whatever reasons they may decide to not go ahead with their project, or they may not get allocation, or I don't know, a whole bunch of different things. And so I guess I'm, having the developer having to pay the town a fee of maybe, I don't know, $1,000, $1,500 to have those assessments done at pre-app. I don't know, it may be
discouraging.
overly burdensome for some, especially the smaller, like just the landowners who want to do like a 2 or 3 lot split. Maybe for some of the bigger projects, I could, I don't know. That's the only thing that I think could make it difficult. But
Maybe there could be a cutoff point to where it would need to be done, like something like Trinity Baptist. You would require the habitat assessment done ahead of time, as opposed to a 2 or 3 lot subdivision, although this particular Trinity had both of those.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we wanted them to do it together. So it was, made more sense.
mm-hmm.
But I think that's unique. to have it split up like that. Isn't that true?
It's a pretty unique situation where a landowner's got two parcels of land that they're developing simultaneously.
And in
That
different.
they're adjacent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds to me like there are kind of three ideas that have been thrown out there. One is to move the wetlands assessment or habitat disturbance assessment up in the process somehow. One is to take a look at the highest development pressure areas in town and proactively get something like a wetlands assessment done on those areas so that we already know what the resources are prior to a pre-application being submitted. And the third that I can think of is to really be critical and deliberate during the DP review to make sure that what we're able to receive at that point in terms of habitat or wetland assessment, that we hold firm on conserving those resources. I know sometimes I feel pressure, somebody's gone through the entire process and they're at the last step and they're like, we've already planned the houses to be in these locations and we're gonna have to go back and do engineering again, and we're gonna have to come back and show it again. And it's just, it feels like it's so late in the process. But if we don't have the information prior to them, we have to be strong in protecting those resources once we do have the information that they exist.
Yeah.
I want to bring up just an example that's just come up. Do you remember the Micho proposed development on Mountain View Road that you reviewed as a pre-app? I think
I remember that it exists.
Yeah, I think there were something like I'm sort of guessing maybe 16 proposed dwellings, and they just had a wetlands delineation done and were shocked at what it revealed, and they've had to cut their proposal way back to something like 9 dwelling units. So it does, these assessments do have an impact, and that's an example of sort of a positive outcome of a resource being protected after they discovered the impacts that would happen.
And it could be a cost savings to the developer to have that information before hiring a company to.
That's what I was gonna say, that seems really unfortunate, like that step in the process could have prevented those folks like a lot of heartache if it had come earlier.
Well, it's not like they've really spent a lot of resources. They had a concept plan. Yeah, their hopes may have been dashed, but now that they've discovered that it's not going to work, they go back to the drawing board and redo their concept plan. So, I mean, to me, it just doesn't seem like very much has been invested yet.
So maybe a different or slightly modified approach then would be to, so when a project is first presented to the planning office, and if you, in your initial review, Melinda, you see that there are wetlands on that parcel, maybe you can, I don't know, strongly encourage the applicant to get their wetland assessment or habitat assessment done ahead of time, before they develop their pre-application or whatever it is. And make it clear to them that, listen, if you're going to move forward, at some point in this process, you're going to need a habitat or a wildlife assessment, a wetland assessment done.
Yeah.
And it's up to you to decide where in your process you want to do that, but you will have to have it done. And it could be, if you wait until too late, you're going to have to go back to, may have to go back to the drawing board.
Yeah, and the Conservation Commission is going to be much less likely to recommend changes at DP if we have that information already at administrative permitting.
Did you have something, Carl? Were you?
Well, I was just going to ask Melinda, is that the one, the one you were describing, is that the one that also includes a daycare?
No, that's another one that is now fully permitted. But that too, I think they ended up finding a lot more wetlands on the parcel than they suspected.
And they also
So-
had a deer wintering
Yeah.
area on their parcel too.
Right. I mean, I suspect that the Trinity Baptist property may kind of be in the same situation where they're going to discover a lot more wetlands than they think are on that parcel. But, yeah.
Okay, so I think pretty much we're coming up to the trapping
Yeah,
issue coming up here. So do we want to move forward with maybe Melinda looking into doing a workshop, getting someone here to, and some articles and information for us to read? Is that right, Melinda? Is that kind of
Yeah,
the,
I think.
Yeah,
that'd be great.
I can look into that. One last thing I wanted to say about this conversation is, really, I think this sort of points towards the importance of strengthening the Chapter 27 language and making it possible for you to really have strong protections for these resources. And prioritization can be part of that. And I think it is going to be important, I think, as Reed suggested, to formalize this process of prioritization so that it's in our bylaw, figure out what the priorities are, put it into formal language right in the bylaw so that you have something to back up your, your recommendations going forward. That would
It's
be
so
my-
much stronger to say per 27 dot blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, I mean,
This needs to be changed.
right. That would be my suggestion is, if you have strong protections in the bylaw, that's really going to be the way going forward to just really try to protect these resources and not have the fallback of, not so much have the fallback of landowners' rights. Right. Anyway, that's my suggestion, just kind of to keep working on the bylaw revisions in the language. But yeah, I can look into getting some more information and seeing if we can get somebody to help us out with this.
okay, we can
That'd be
continue to
great.
have it on the agenda.
Just one more thing on this, so then there's the question of whether or not the applicant should be recruiting the consultant to do the wetland or wildlife habitat assessment versus just the town, regardless of where in the process or when in the process it happens.
So Melinda, do we now have a list of, like, if somebody says who should do this, do we have a kind of accepted list of people to do it at this point?
Or a criteria, if not an accepted list, like I assume it has to be, isn't it? It usually seems like it's the state.
So the criteria is it's got to be a professional wildlife ecologist. We don't normally give recommendations to anybody about which consultant to use. And I think that's, sort of the policy of the town is not to recommend certain people. But I'm not sure the state has a list. What we usually tell people is if you go to our website and you look at the DRB page, you'll see, a number of consultants will come up and some will be more, will come up more often than others. Just, take anybody off that, off of those consultants that you see up there. I have a list in my head of different consultants. But yeah.
I know Winooski Valley Park District was interested in this idea of how to potentially reform the process of these assessments so that they are more objective, and starting with determining whether they are objective currently or whether
Yeah.
there are problems with the integrity of those assessments.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think it would be, I guess I would like to see the town take more ownership on these assessments.
Mhm.
Can I just
and
ask a
you're-
question? Is the reason that the town doesn't maintain a list because we don't want to be like funneling business and like preferencing businesses, like different, do you know what I mean? Like, is that the reason that we don't want to be like biased towards like helping somebody's business or hurting somebody's business?
I think so, yeah.
Right, and I understand that, and that the town cannot offer, have a preferred, cannot recommend a certain company over another one to the private sector. But what I was going to propose is perhaps, if the town takes over ownership of this, it's certainly within reason for the town to issue a call, through a bid process, do a bid process for a consultant that serves the town on a project by project basis. And then that consultant does the wetland assessments or the habitat disturbance assessments for whatever period of time you want, whether it's 1 year or 3 years or 5 years or something. And, and they agree to provide the town with X services for each of these assessments. And then the consultant is, the town is the consultant's client versus the developer.
Yeah.
And I just feel like that would get us a better product.
I agree with that approach. And I'm also wondering if, like, maybe Gary knows the answer to this. I don't, or Eric, maybe you know the answer to this, but does UVM extension, could not a consultant firm, like, like not a business that maybe doesn't have as much stake in serving a client, like in air quotes, client, be an option?
I think that, all due respect to UVM extension, I don't know if you're thinking it would be students doing this or
No, I was thinking like
Oh.
an extension agent. Like, is that, I don't know if that's like within their realm of their scope of work, but the thought that popped into my head is like, is the fundamental issue that it is a consultant and that they are a consultant hired by the developer, and they it's like incumbent on them to like produce something that the person that hired them is happy with, right? And does that like is that the introduction of the issue for us? Maybe one way to get around that is to hire somebody whose charge is to serve the community with science-based outcomes regardless of who's hired them. That sounds extension-y to me. I don't even know if extension does this.
Yeah, I don't know either. I know, I just thought of something in between, Eric, that maybe we could think about at least, is perhaps we have a consultant that, that we value on hand to review the wetland delineations and the wildlife habitat assessments, and see if they, if they have enough information to agree with them, or if they have some issues that they think need more information. Is that kind of an interim step?
Like
perhaps?
a QC
No,
function, yeah.
I was thinking about that too, Gary, and I suppose we could try that, but I just wonder how much of this is whether or not that third party could do that without actually going out and doing the field work themselves.
Yeah,
Well,
they're
yeah, I
gonna
just
say they
threw
want to
it.
basically do it themselves, yeah.
Yeah, I just threw that out there as a potential thing. I guess not.
I
Sounds
like
like this is a
Eric's
topic.
original proposal of having the town be basically the person that the consultant is producing the product for, and still having the developer pay it, but having it be like almost like we are hiring them and the developer is paying them.
Do we know what other
How could you
towns?
get the developer, or how can you ask the developer to pay it when the town is controlling it? Shouldn't the town pay for
Well,
it?
the town is requiring it now anyway, so it's just a transfer of the responsibility, really.
Right.
Right.
Sounds like there's more on this topic, Bone, for
Yeah.
a future
Yeah.
meeting.
We can
I mean-
continue, right, the discussion.
I mean, this, obviously would have to be a bylaw amendment. That's how it would be, put into place. So I think we can look at it as part of the chapter 27 package of amendments.
Yeah, so right back, yeah, we'll do some reading up on Melinda's, we'll send some information and hopefully get someone to come and talk at one of the next meetings and continue on with this. Do we know, Melinda, what other towns do? Are there other towns nearby that do their own habitat assessment? They hire it out?
I don't, well, I'm not sure. And I was supposed to look into that and I haven't looked into it yet. I apologize.
Oh, no problem. So, all right, well, it's 8:19 and so do we need to, we're just going to continue this discussion, I guess, on future meetings.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so we don't need to vote on anything or make a motion. So Melinda, do you know if anybody was here that wanted to be a part of the trapping discussion?
Lynn Blevins is here.
Okay.
I think she's the only one.
Okay, so we
But yeah, so I don't know whether anybody got a chance to read it, but I just sent out a memo last night, yesterday, kind of outlining the issue here and the background and a recommended option for you to consider. I haven't drafted any actual language, but I can go through this if you'd like.
So kind of Melinda, the background is that the select board asked the Conservation Commission to come up with a draft policy. Is that what?
Yeah, that is correct.
We asked to
So-
be part of the process.
Yeah. So the select board has asked the Conservation Commission to draft a policy, or well, really an ordinance. Just my knowledge of Vermont statutes seems to indicate that I think an ordinance could be problematic because that indicates the town is trying to regulate trapping, which it is not authorized to do under state statute. My recommendation would be to call it a policy. We can also get a legal opinion on this ordinance versus policy thing. I think it would probably work the same way. I saw a nice information sheet that the Vermont League of Cities and Towns has regarding the difference between an ordinance and a policy. Basically, an ordinance has regulatory impact. It affects people, just general people in the population of the town, whereas a policy has more to do with internal, is sort of, affects the town internally, like the town staff and so forth. So regardless of which way this goes, and I'm suggesting policy, it should have an intent statement that explains the need and purpose of the policy and its limitations under the law. I recommend that the policy prohibit non-essential trapping on town-owned properties, but allow the trapping to happen under the direction of town staff to manage beavers or other wildlife where infrastructure, property, or public safety is threatened. Vermont law requires people trapping on another's land to obtain permission from the landowner. So the policy could have a statement that the select board won't be granting permission for non-essential trapping on town lands, including accessing like a stream like the Allen Brook from town land for the purposes of setting a trap. And then the policy should define what essential trapping is, what constitutes essential, and define the conditions under which, essential trapping is necessary to manage beaver population or prevent destruction of infrastructure or a threat to public safety. So, I'm also suggesting that if we have a policy that's going to prohibit non-essential trapping, that it also have a statement in it, just telling people where they can trap legally. And you know, I'm really the vast majority of trapping that happens by necessity in this town is done to manage beaver issues. So I'm thinking that a section of this policy really be dedicated to the topic of beaver management and using trapping to manage beavers. Obviously, the Department of Public Works is going to have to review and sign off on any policy that gets drafted because they have to have the ability to protect town infrastructure. The
Hey,
policy.
Melinda, could
Yeah.
I just interrupt? There's some background noise. Somebody must have a radio, or there's something. Is anybody else hearing that? Or
Linda
is
has office mates.
Yeah,
Oh,
Mike,
okay, there you
I'm
go. So
sorry.
that's fine.
it's probably Matt.
That's fine. That's fine. Okay, just was wondering. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so so the policy could require the adherence could require the adherence to best management practices. You know, could say something like, you know, first choice would be use preventative measures. And, you know, to monitor town infrastructure, to identify potential beaver problems ahead of time, and maybe implement appropriate control measures. Any beaver problems should be brought to the attention of Fish and Wildlife Warden and fish wildlife biologists in the Agency of Natural Resources. As you know, when it's first identified, lethal control, beavers should always be conducted by trained and licensed trappers during the trapping season. And if, you know, whenever possible, and, you know, if it's not possible to trap during the trapping season, provide an exemption to allow trapping out of season, but that would really be as a last resort. So that's kind of what the thoughts that I've had. And if, you know, I'll open it up to discussion if folks have thoughts about this.
Yeah, thank you.
I just want to ask a clarifying question, which you mentioned when I didn't read this super fully, but I just skimmed over it. And I am confused about the legal, like, do we need an attorney to weigh in on whether or not a policy is okay? And why would a policy be okay, but not an ordinance?
Yeah, we probably, you know, we will definitely, whatever gets drafted up will go to our legal counsel and be reviewed. So let me just actually, I'm going to bring up that document just because it explains it really well. Let's see.
So would a policy have enough?
Well, and that's what I'm concerned about, Terry.
Right.
I don't view a policy as allowing us to control what people do, only what the town does. So if the town were doing trapping, then a policy could guide the town in how we do the trapping or what process is followed. But when it comes to regulating trapping by residents, that it seems to me, based on this document, Melinda, that can only be done through an ordinance.
Correct. And the town does not have an authority to regulate trapping. That's my understanding about state statute, is that the town cannot regulate hunting and trapping. So there are state laws that regulate trapping, and the game wardens enforce those state laws. And, you know, the police, when they find a situation, refer cases to the state game warden. I mean, again, we'll ask our attorney, but I think the state statute is pretty clear on this. You know, that we can't just say, you know, town of Williston bans trapping on town land.
So if the ordinance for the state of Vermont is that a trapper needs to get permission
Right,
from
correct.
the landowner, and if the policy of Williston is to not grant permission to trapping on town land, then that seems like that should take care of it. if the permission is not given, and I think that's where it stands right now. If the town is called right now and someone asks to trap on town land, it's right now it's that Eric would not be giving permission. Is that correct?
Yeah, that would be it, you know, just establishing a policy that, you know, that we're not going to grant permission.
And does the
And-
state statute currently say that permission is required?
Yes,
Okay, so that's the piece I was missing. So a policy would allow the town to have some sort of control. Thanks.
yeah.
And then it gives the town authority to hire a trapper if there is a problem, if there's going to be infrastructure problem or safety problems, or so they still have that tool to use.
Mhm.
Can we just maybe hear from Lynn on this and what your concerns are and the way that we're talking about framing a policy, is that meeting your concerns?
Sure. So I think my main concern was just cleared up regarding what the town can or cannot do. I mean, this really started from Front Porch Forum post where someone did trap on town land, and other people came across it during, you know, recreation. And so, you know, quite a few people were upset about that, and about the cruelty of it, and also having come across it, or the, you know, just the threat of coming across, seeing an animal in a trap. That's what started this whole thing. I shared that with Eric, and it got picked up by the select board. I know there's not a lot that we can do because of the state regulations. And I think what we've just been talking about is that is where the town can thread the needle to say, well, we are a landowner. Trappers need to ask permission of landowners before trapping. And the town is a landowner, and the town's policy will be that we are not going to permit trapping. Trapping on town land will only be for essential services. Or essential, you know, essential trapping to protect public infrastructure, public health, public safety, etc.
And I like the essential and non-essential. I think that, you know, is very clear as opposed to recreational and commercial.
I believe also that in Melinda's memo, there's a need to define essential, and perhaps Lynn has just suggested some language that might be useful to us around public health and public infrastructure protection.
Right, which Melinda is in the memo, really. The only other thing that Eric mentioned to me is research. I think at one point somebody did do a research project that Eric gave permission for them to do that. So I just mentioned that as something else that he had mentioned to me. I wouldn't necessarily have thought of it. And if Eric asked for that to be put in, then I would just say that, you know, that research needs to be done under with animal welfare oversight. So like if UVM is doing research that involves animals, that there is, you know, a mechanism for animal welfare oversight. And so we would need to be sure that, you know, was sort of legitimate research.
Terry, Gary has his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Gary.
That's all right. I just had a question about, you know, if this goes through, how do we police it? Are we required to have signs on town land that say trapping by permission only, call so-and-so, or kind of like what we do with hunting, where we have to kind of tell people there's no hunting in certain areas? You have a sense for that, Melinda?
Yeah, so we should probably have a sign on, you know, on the properties, just at I guess the most common access point. You know, a lot of these properties don't have trails on them or anything. We don't have to have signage the way that no hunting laws work in Vermont, where you have to put a sign every 400 feet along the boundary. We wouldn't have to do that because here, hunting is different because it's allowed by default unless your property is posted. But this, you have to ask the landowner for permission, so it's not allowed by default. So I think one sign at sort of a common entrance point and also information on our website would probably be sufficient. But you're correct in that, it's really enforcement is going to be difficult.
And it's not really up to the town to, this is Fish and Wildlife's territory. They should be pretty much monitoring this,
Correct.
and this person who set this trap on the Mahane property was doing it illegally because there was no permission given. And then a firearm was discharged in the area where it shouldn't have been. So, the Fish and Wildlife should be, having the responsibility of that, not the town.
Right. And I should mention that in that case, it was enforced by the game wardens and the police. So.
Right.
I guess in response to Gary's comment, I would say, it's not enforceable in other places. I mean, people have, it would be enforceable to the same extent that it is in other places. Like if I have a woodlot somewhere and nobody asked me and they trap on that land, then how am I supposed to enforce that? So then that's on the trapper that they're setting it illegally. So it would be, I mean, I think that's just how it is in Vermont. It's not enforced anywhere.
It's a combination of education and enforcement when you know that something's going on. I think one important thing to note from my experience, which is very limited, I don't have hunting or trapping experience, but my father does have land in Westford, and at times there were people living there and at times not. And one of the best resources we had was a bow hunter who did ask for permission. And one of the things that we asked of them was to keep an eye out for illegal activities. And so, there's something to be said for engaging the hunting and community to help identify trapping that's taking place that may not be permission granted by the town.
I think that's a really good point. And also I was thinking about Lynn's question of research and like how we would make sure it's legitimate. And when I do my research, I have to apply for human subjects. I have to apply for basically permission to an internal committee at SUNY Plattsburgh that is like the Committee on Human Subjects Research. It's usually called IRB, Internal Review Board. I don't know why we call it something different. But there's similar forms for research on animals. And so the town, part of the policy could be that the town will consider research exemptions or whatever we want to say if appropriate paperwork, like IRB paperwork, we could use that term. It's Internal Review Board is pretty universal, is produced, and I could find like an example form.
Yeah, the animal sort of equivalent of IRB is IACUC, but I can't remember what it stands for, but I could find that out from I have connections with the Department of Animal Sciences at UVM, so.
Yeah, UVM requires the same thing, and any funding agency would require that too if it was a funded research project.
So basically any legitimate project they would have to fill the paperwork out anyway, and we would just ask for a copy of it. It wouldn't even be like a significant burden on them because they're already doing it.
The other thought is that, Melinda, you had a whole section there on, other available lands. you know, if someone wanted to do research, there's definitely other public lands that are accessible for people to do research on, other than, you know, town lands where people, you know, the point was brought up that, you know, our town is growing, there's more people in the community, they're looking for more options to go walking and recreate. And, you know, if you know, the educational, you know, trapping would need to be done, it could be done on other lands that would be less traveled. You know, that might be.
True. Yeah, true. But I think it's important for the town to continue to collaborate, you know, with certainly with these educational institutions, and sometimes with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has asked to set traps for example, for raccoon rabies bait and stuff like that.
Sure.
That's
Yep.
not exactly research, although they probably incorporate some research into that.
Mhm.
And they
I
also
think the-
trap for birds too. I don't know if that falls under the same
Yeah.
trapping
You
issues,
mean
but
banding?
there's a,
Bird banding?
yeah, banding as well as just
Yeah.
assessments of, you know, population sizes and such.
Regarding the rabies, we could use language like trapping and monitoring, or sorry, research and monitoring, right? Like it's not
Mhm.
capital R research, but it's monitoring, and I don't know.
I think the research Eric had approved was rabies. And so, you know, the
Yeah.
species that carry rabies are the mesocarnivores, who actually really thrive near human populations. So, you know, it in a way, like, town land is sort of perfect for that kind of research versus, you know, halfway up Camel's Hump, where
Yeah.
I mean, more,
Mhm.
you know, it depends on your research question, but there may be situations where something like town land is perfect for that, where you have the human animal interface.
Mhm.
Were they using cage traps, or were they actually using like leg hold traps for the raccoons?
Yeah, I really don't know. I imagine that they were using cage,
Cage
Right.
traps.
they were using cage traps.
And that's
I know
not
in
what
South
we're-
Burlington they are. Yeah, in
Yeah.
South Burlington, I saw them doing rabies trapping, and they were using cage traps for raccoons.
Right. So that's not what we're looking at here. We're looking at the body gripping and leg hold traps, right?
Well, I guess that's a good question, because if someone came to us and said, I mean, that was initially
Oh, yeah, that's right.
the request that, you know, sort of I wrote up on behalf
All
of
trapping?
all these people on Front Porch Forum. But I think I mean, those are particularly cruel traps that we would like to not see. But I guess what would we do if someone said, I would like to trap in a cage trap, and then, you know, and then that's how someone, you know, for non-essential trapping. I think it's probably clearer just to say no trapping on town land versus like, well, this kind is crueler than this kind. So we're gonna, you know, we're not gonna give permission for leg holds, but we would for a cage. Like, it probably just is better to say no trapping, except for essential trapping.
Okay, because a lot of animals can't be transported because of rabies, so they would have to be killed anyway, right?
I would just like to, I mean, this is sort of an aside, but I'd just like to bring up this idea about I don't know, less humane versus more humane, or less cruel versus more cruel traps, and our assumption that it's actually less or more cruel to catch an animal in a cage versus a leg hold trap, and our sort of our human-based assumptions about, you know, just the kind of cruelty that animals might experience, and that certain leg hold traps, if they're set properly, might actually be more humane than a box trap from an animal's experience. Anyway, just want to point out
Yeah.
that certain assumptions that we make based on our human experience that may not necessarily apply to animals.
I certainly don't feel like I have any scientific understanding of the difference between the experience of an animal and different types of traps. And so I would be in favor of addressing trapping altogether, regardless of the type of trap, especially given that the whole purpose here is to say that trapping is for only for essential purposes and not for any other purpose.
There's one area that might be considered sort of mild trapping that, and we'd have to determine whether this is trapping or not, and that is mist netting for birds for bird banding, in which the birds are not killed, the birds are released after they've been banded. There is a very small mortality associated with this practice. And I would think that this would be an area that we would exclude from all of these, from this policy, but we might have to explicitly exclude it.
Do you feel like we would name bird banding as an exempt activity from the policy, or would we define monitoring? Like bird banding is usually done for bird counts, for monitoring and research. Would we put it under that and then ask that banders ask permission, or would we just explicitly say that bird banding is exempt?
I think I would just favor saying bird banding is exempt.
Although I think it'd be nice to know what's going on town land from the standpoint of research.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, it's not hard to do that. We'll give them permission, but it'd be nice to, so that the town can just be aware of it and include it in what the town's used for.
Yeah,
Land is used for.
and I'm not sure what they do now, like Audubon, Vermont has bird banding exhibits on Catamount.
Well, they
Yeah.
definitely are asking permission, like I
Yeah.
definitely know about it.
And Mark
Yeah, it's nice
Labar
to know.
is an experienced bander. Yeah.
Mhm. Right.
Yeah. I don't think that you would just have
What-
somebody setting up a misting net and bird banding.
But what is the definition at the state level about what qualifies as trapping? Because I think it's important to me that whatever we do is consistent with the definition of trapping at the state level to avoid confusion. So if netting birds for banding activities or whatever is not considered trapping at a state level, I think it would muddy the waters to include it in our policy recommendation at a town level about trapping.
Right.
I'm
that's-
trying to research it right now, but I haven't found it yet.
Most of it just is around fur bearer trapping.
Right, yeah. And I would assume that bird banding is not trapping, is because you're not ultimately harvesting that animal. You're releasing it back into the wild.
Right. Well, yeah, that's kind of my original question. Is it by the state considered trapping or not? If it isn't considered trapping, then
Looks like it's not. It looks like fur bearer is the key term in the state statute. I'm seeing, let's see, where is the statute here?
traps.
Hmm. Do they have a definitions section? Taking possession, trapping.
Yeah, I think we're going beyond what
Yeah.
really needs to be.
But-
I think,
Yeah.
I think we could,
So-
Melinda, if you could look, get a
Just make
hold
sure that
of
it seems
Fish and Wildlife.
consistent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
But I
you're gonna have,
I think
ahead.
yeah, I'd like to see the term fur bearer trapping
Yeah.
used in the policy to
Mhm.
be clear what we're talking about and to have the language align with what's there at the state level. I wasn't able to find a statute number, but I was looking at the Vermont Fish and Wildlife website about fur bearer hunting and trapping. And that seems to be the key term. I'll put that link I was looking at in the chat here in case anybody wants to take a look at it.
I mean, there are things that do get trapped inadvertently, bald eagles and snowy owls and other owls. But
Yeah, it's
that's
the
not
intent of the
targeting one.
trap. Yeah, it's
Right.
the intent of the trap that makes it a fur bearer trapping.
Right.
So
Yeah.
if you're putting out a trap that's intended to trap fur bearers, then you're fur bearer trapping regardless of what you capture.
Right. Okay, so so Melinda, this is just kind of a rough draft and you'll be putting together do we need to, make a motion or vote on something here or what is the
No,
next?
No, so this is just, this is a way to start the discussion. The next step is I can actually draft some language and share with you, and then you can look at it and then we can discuss it.
And so I think there's is there an agreement that a policy would be the way to go as opposed to an ordinance, which we can't really do anyway?
Melinda has convinced me.
Great. And then Melinda, you'll get a hold of the attorneys, this town.
Yeah,
attorney.
I mean, if you would like, what I can do is I can ask Eric to ask the question of the attorney. We're considering an ordinance or policy for this. What's your opinion on whether the town could pass an ordinance? Would that be legal or not? I mean, I could have Eric ask the attorney the question if you want to do that before getting into drafting language.
Gary's got his hand up. Sorry, just.
No, that was accidental, but I think this policy will serve the purpose of what our objectives are. It seems easier to.
Yeah, and Lynn, does that seem that would work for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I'm not a legal expert, but it seems kind of clear that we are not able to draft an ordinance. I mean, just based on a lay person's reading of things. And I think the policy is probably overall the best place to land.
One
Okay,
thing
great.
I would personally
Okay.
like to see in the next draft, Melinda, is enforcement considerations, not necessarily in the policy language, but as far as like the framing of the recommendation, I think I'd like to see more information, provide more information about how we envision this policy being enforced, as far as how we engage the game wardens and things like that. Because they're going to need to be educated on our town policy, right? In addition to the state statute.
Mhm.
I mean, would that really be different from anything else that they're doing? If there's a trap set on Richmond town property, and then someone notices it, would then Fish and Wildlife say, well, did you get permission from the town?
Right, it's not necessarily different, but I think not everybody is aware of what that process is. And so I think when proposing a policy to be adopted, I think it's important to speak to how it will be enforced, even if it's the same as it always would have been.
Mhm.
So just, I guess would a statement, just a simple statement of this policy will be enforced by the state Department of Fish and Wildlife game wardens, or just, trapping. Yeah, trapping is whatever, trapping regulations are enforced by the state, whatever. And if
And
the
reports of
police-
trapping reports of trapping
Yeah.
will be handled in this manner. I think that's the piece that I'm
Yeah.
looking for.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Right,
So,
and just stating that it's the usual manner. We're not
Yeah.
stirring the pot too much,
right.
right? This is how.
There's just not being, no permission is being given to trap on town lands.
Mhm.
Yeah, and there's no additional burden of the town other than Eric or somebody giving permission or not.
Mhm.
Which has been all along, is that someone should, and must call the town to get permission. So,
Yeah.
okay, well, we're almost to 9, and probably we should Melinda can write up some of that, the draft, and we can look at it. Do you think you'd be able to do that by next meeting, or do you need a little more time?
I can probably write something up by next meeting.
Okay, and then we'll.
I'd
review.
also like to draw your attention to a memo that Lynn wrote to Eric Wells on October 14th. That was part of the select board package for their November meeting, which has a very succinct and easily understood statement about everything that we've been discussing that you might be using to help draw up this policy.
Is this here?
It's in this stuff that you sent around for the.
Is that the threat to public safety, threat to property, and research with
Yeah.
animal welfare?
Yeah. It includes all that. The only thing you need to change is
Okay.
recreational trapping to non-essential trapping.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, great. So Melinda, if you can work on that, that'd be great. And then if you can get it done by December 15th, we can review that and I guess, either continue to work on it or present it to the select board.
Mhm.
Great. Okay, is there any more conversation? Any more comment?
I guess the only thing is a community member wanted to come to the meeting today, wasn't able to. He is a homeowner at the Old Stage Estates development, and they have had recurrent beaver problems. So he wanted to speak to you all about their experience. And I said he could come next meeting and briefly talk about their experience. I actually don't think it's really going to have an impact on the on the policy that we're proposing, but anyway.
Okay, great.
Thanks very
Okay,
much,
great.
everyone.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you very much.
Thanks
And
for coming.
Thank you.
Melinda.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, Melinda, sorry, we're pretty close to the end of 9 o'clock, but do you wanted the next is staff report and other report or other business?
Yeah, and really, one thing I did want to let you know about is that the select board adopted a bunch of bylaw amendments, which included the watershed protection amendments that you worked on so long ago. It seems like so long ago. Maybe it was like a year ago anyway. So Chapter 29 amendments have been adopted.
Where's the best place to review those? It's been so long since we.
Yeah, well, we will have them up. We'll have the newly adopted amendments up on the website probably in the next week or so. We're going to.
It's probably on the select board packet from the most recent meeting.
Yeah, I think it would have been. I'm trying to remember. I can probably find it and send you a link. It was like maybe the meeting before last, or.
I'll see if I can find it while you continue to give your updates.
Yeah. And then let's see this. I just thought I would share with you. I'd set up a bunch of trail cameras and kind of did a little, I don't know, rather unsophisticated count of estimated trail usage and came up with some, I don't know, information. And, you know, if you, I don't know, I guess suffice it to say that it's not unexpected information, but Sucker Brook gets a lot of use. Probably it gets the most use of any of our parks and trails. 5 Tree Hill, that was the second most used park.
Melinda, can I ask a quick question about that data? So a lot of people that use Sucker Brook come to 5 Tree. Is
Yeah.
there any way to just pull those apart? I mean, because that,
You mean that they go from 5
they
Tree
hike
Hill?
up and end up on
And then they
the
end up-
5 Tree Hill Park usage. And I don't know where those cameras are, whether they would pick up that kind of thing or how that works.
It's really picking up, they were placed at the entrances. So,
Okay,
so it would, it would not pick up people that were just heading like people who were heading from 5 Tree and ended up on Route 2A. It would not be able to pull that apart. But
I guess I was
basically-
thinking of the people that hike from Suckerbrook up to the top of 5 Tree Hill. That's kind of a,
I kind of consider that, I'm treating that as the Suckerbrook Trail, but
okay,
yeah, you're right.
So,
The destination is the same. It's the
Right,
overlook.
okay,
Yeah,
yeah, thank you.
yeah, sure. And then I thought this was interesting about Mud Pond Country Park is how many pedestrians are using that park. So the pedestrians are in red here. And, so I just thought that was interesting, how many people are walking their dogs on the country park trail.
I'm amazed at how many, when I walk over there,
Mhm.
that little short trail that goes over to cross the road, how much
Yeah.
traffic you actually see that goes across there.
Right. And also what was interesting is that, so I set these cameras up we had a lot of pretty nice weather that week. And this was Indigenous Peoples' Day weekend. And the Sunday, you see, that was the highest use day. And there were only 14 people. So it's not a whole lot of use, in my opinion. So,
On the
Another
country
quick-
club, yeah.
Another quick question on Wednesday, that data, does that big dog thing mean those dogs are walking themselves?
what is,
It's kind of interesting.
no, it just
Well, you
means
got
that
more
people,
dogs than pedestrians,
yeah, well, it just means that.
or they have a couple
some-
dogs, I
A
guess.
lot
Some
of people bike with
people
their
are-
dogs.
Yeah, some people
Oh.
bike with their dogs.
Yes.
Okay,
That's
yeah.
huge. Yeah,
Some
that-
people have more than one dog. Um,
Yeah.
So, yeah,
That's why, that's why just, this is a whole nother topic, is I would love to see some signage on South Road that
Yeah.
just shows people that, tells people that there are people crossing the road here. Because
Yeah.
that's a flat stretch of road and people tend to pick
Yeah.
up speed. And there's people with dogs and bikes.
well, we've asked for that and Bruce has said no.
Oh,
But
then there's also a
free.
horse sign and a tractor sign.
No, I know.
Right, right.
Yeah, yeah. No,
Maybe-
I
Yeah, okay. It's a
I
different
agree.
subject.
I agree. There's a need for signage there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we want to appeal that decision, Melinda, we would need to speak with the select board, is that right?
Yeah, I guess that would be one way. If you, would like to.
I
ask
strongly
the
agree, Terry,
selectmen.
that signage is necessary to deal with, and now that we're talking about the partnership to add adaptive biking, there,
Mm,
it's
Mhm.
going to increase the importance of awareness of pedestrian crossing. So I think I would be in favor of
mhm.
Yeah, just a simple,
a memo
Line
to
that
the
says-
select board,
Yeah.
expressing concern that the signage was declined.
Mhm.
So Melinda,
Or-
when you said we've asked for that, does that mean you did? I just wonder if it would make a difference if we did if we voted on it or somehow gave it a little more weight coming from the commission as opposed to from you.
I think that, so, all right. So when I say that I've gotten some citizen complaints from that area requesting signage. And when I've passed those along, the response has been, we're not going to sign it. And so
Is-
I think
there-
I think that maybe the best strategy might be for me to talk to Eric and get his opinion on, how
How to
we
proceed.
might proceed.
So was
Yeah.
the complaint that there was too much signage on South
No.
Road?
No,
Not it.
no. It
Right,
was
okay.
somebody who thought that we needed to put up signage regarding recreational use in the area, and they were concerned that somebody was going to get hurt or
Yeah.
killed or whatever crossing the road.
And it
And
would be, go ahead.
I passed that along and was told that they would not be putting up signage.
Okay,
Okay,
so maybe
so-
if you could speak to Matt.
That would be
Or
too
to Eric.
safe to do
Yeah,
Yeah.
Linda, if, I would like to,
that.
I would like you to speak with Eric and find out what the next step is if, because it sounds like there's appetite to take it.
Okay, I will do that.
It would be a little, if the bikers were just crossing the road where the trail goes across, but they're not, the bikes aren't allowed on that. They have to go on the road. And it's pretty scary to watch people try to navigate with their dog or children. Just this past weekend, I was there and, two parents had two children and a dog, and they had to navigate all the way down the road and, get across there.
So I
So
think.
what did you come away with? What was the gist of the trail counter was?
So my thoughts are to either see if we can get additional, like actual trail counters. I would like to keep doing this, have it maybe do each trail once per season, spring, summer, and fall, just to get a better idea of usage. I think it's valuable information to have.
And
If
so
you don't
would-
know what you're funding, it's hard to ask for funding, right? But
Yeah.
if you know what you're funding, then it makes it
Yeah.
a lot easier.
Yeah.
I'll just say some things that I was on a collaborator call with some colleagues yesterday, and I learned that Strava recently rolled out an academic API request, which means that if you're an academic, you can request access to Strava data for research purposes. So this is
Mhm.
not a research project, but if there was ever an opportunity for one, it just like hypothetically, if I had a research project about like trail use or something, I can
Yeah.
request access to Strava data. And then another thing that I'm looking into is this company called Streetlight, which this is sort of crazy that they do this, and it makes me feel a little bit funny about mountain biking with my phone now, but they essentially have these devices that you put at trailheads, and it pulls zip code data from cell phone bills as people pass. And that is a service that that like a municipality or like national parks, for example, can pay for. And they also have an academic request portal where if you're doing a research project, they'll provide that service for free. So just like ideas for the commission to think about, like are those things that we would ever want to do in the future, and like the possibility of like crafting like a master's thesis that would both have a research component and answer questions for the town. Yeah, Gary, you have a question about Streetlight? Doesn't it make you feel super uncomfortable?
No, I guess my question is more, what's the cost of a trail counter, Melinda? I know we've looked into that a little bit.
I think like a really decent one can cost between, I don't know, $2,000 to $5,000. So they're pretty expensive.
Yeah,
So the
I think
conversation that I was having yesterday was like, do we buy trail counters for this project that we have, or do we request from one of these companies access to this data that they might give us for free?
So Kim, just a note about that. We actually do have access to Strava data via the Regional Planning Commission, but I found it to be difficult to parse, and I'm not sure, like we actually had some UVM students as for their capstone project look at using, I don't know if you remember this, but they looked at using Strava data to estimate trail usage. And I mean, I guess the problem is that until you come up with an estimate for what the percentage of users who use Strava data actually is, it's difficult to translate that into estimated trail usage numbers.
Right, so like right there, that's a master's project, right? Where
Yeah.
like we hire a master's student and they pick however many locations in town and they either do what Gary's saying and we get a trail counter, or they do like the traditional sit in place surveys, or they do all three and they say like, what is the comparison between these three methods? And then their thesis is really like
How to
a
extrapolate.
methods. It's a methods thesis that's like, I mean, that's a really interesting contribution. Like from my perspective, that's a really interesting contribution to the Parks, Recreation, and Tourism literature.
Mhm.
You have access to Strava data from Strava, like you have the API data.
Yeah, I can, I can get it through the Regional Planning Commission. Like they gave me a password and I can go to the Strava site and download that API data.
Yeah, I mean, if at some point as the town or as the Conservation Commission, if we're like, that seems useful, I can apply for an internal assistantship at Plattsburgh and try to recruit a student that might be interested in working on something like that. Like that, to me, that question of like, how do these different methods compare and what is like that's like a legitimate research question that would be a useful contribution. And then if the town gets, you know, managerial information or decision-making information out of that, that's amazing, you know?
I think I would support that. I think that would be a great thing to have done.
I think I missed the assistantship deadline for this year. It's like the middle of November, but I will send an email, and if not, we can talk about it next year.
I guess I would support that we investigate getting our own trail counter. I think either way, it's an important piece of the work you're talking about, Kim, too, because you got to show, you know, what the real data is compared to what you're trying to predict it with.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it'd be
item?
worth it. Well, I don't know, but I think it'd be valuable. And Melinda, I think you've set up a plan already. You could move it around among the different trails, you know, a few days at a time, use it all seasonally like you propose. I think it'd be a really valuable asset.
And this Catamount Outdoor Family Center, or they put in for a trail counter through a grant?
They didn't get the grant.
Oh, they didn't. Oh, shoot.
No.
That already came out. Okay.
Yeah.
I agree, Gary. I'd like to explore whether it could be part of our capital request for the next fiscal year, or whether we think we have funds in our operating budget, you know, later on in the year that we could use. I think that's it's a valuable asset long term for the town, whether or not we engage with research students and whether or not we do anything other than just collect trail usage data to justify and to guide our trail maintenance efforts.
My one recommendation is that if we request a trail counter, we spend a bunch of time thinking about how many we actually need, because many networks have multiple entrances.
Yeah.
And so I don't think we want to set aside money for one, because that will certainly be an incomplete picture of who's using different networks. So
True.
I don't disagree with Gary at all, but I want us to think like critically about how many we would actually need to be comprehensive.
Yeah, and how we use them. I mean, I think there are ways of using one in a statistically designed way to capture most of the issues.
So
incomplete block designs and stuff like that.
So we would be using this information, trail counting for grants, for getting funding for grants, and maybe increasing parking lots. So what are some other things that this information would be used for?
I think like requesting funds from the select board for ongoing trail maintenance, demonstrating like the utility and value of our forested parcels and our, you know, I think that there's like a lot of management implications, like understanding how many people are using trails is really going to allow us to manage better. If we see that some places are being sort of overloved,
Yep.
we might see that in trail count numbers long before we see that in like ecological impacts.
Well, I must say, I've hiked Mud Pond from both sides in the last month, and Anne did a great job with what she had, but boy, are they in bad shape, the trails, the puncheons, the boardwalks. And I don't know, my thought was, okay, the town doesn't have money to fix these, but then what if somebody breaks an ankle, breaks a leg, where is the town responsible for having these trails open for public use, but not keeping them up?
Well, the town does have insurance for such things.
That's good, but I think
So let them
preventative would be
break their
much
leg.
better.
I mean,
Sorry,
someone
Jeff.
slipped in the parking lot outside last week, so,
Oh,
yeah,
man.
Yeah.
anyway.
Okay,
Yeah,
but that was just one, that the trails are getting overloved. I know we know that. And, but this spring really, I think, needs to, we need to go get the monies or whatever, but there needs to be some repair done on those.
I have to leave.
Yes, it's 9:15.
I do too.
Okay. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay.
So
Bye.
is there any more discussion with the remaining members?
No,
Do you
I'd
have
love to
any?
hear about the volunteer work that I've been involved with, but we can do that next time.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
All right, great. So I guess 9:15 and we can adjourn the meeting. Thank you,
Have a
everyone.
great day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.